Hey everybody, it's Diane Neto living in Barrie. Today I'm going to go over conditions in an out-of-town offer. So when you put in an offer, and one day I'll go through the whole offer with you, but there are certain conditions, especially in an out-of-town property, that really need to be put in there. So what I'm going to do is I am going to share the screen with you and explain the conditions and show them to you and make sure you have those things in there. So the first thing is it's called the Schedule A. So after the agreement of purchase and sale, the Schedule A is where all the conditions are put. The rest of the pages are standard clauses. You just fill in like the price and the irrevocable time and things like that. So Schedule A is where all the conditions would be listed. So the first thing in Schedule A, always on every single one, is that the buyer agrees to pay the balance of the purchase price subject to adjustments to the seller on completion of this transaction with funds drawn on a lawyer's trust account in the form of a bank draft, certified check, or wire transfer using a large value transfer system. So what that's saying is if you put a $50,000 deposit down and then the bank is going to, that deposit go towards the purchase price, and then the bank has to forward you a certain amount of money. So this is just saying that you are going to pay for the house. Basically, in layman's terms, you're going to pay for the house on closing. When a clause starts with this offer is conditional upon, it's a condition that has to be waived or fulfilled, or you have no deal and you get your deposit back. So this one is the buyer arranging at the buyer's own expense a new charge, mortgage, and insurance, unless the buyer gives notice in writing, delivered to the seller personally, or in accordance with any other provisions for the delivery notice in this agreement of purchase or sale, and or any schedule thereto not later than 5 banking days, that this condition is fulfilled, this offer shall be null and void, and the deposit shall be returned to the buyer in full without deduction. This condition is included for the benefit of the buyer and may be waived at the buyer's sole option by notice in writing to the seller as aforesaid within the time period stated herein. Okay, that sounds really confusing. In plain English, you have 5 banking days to secure financing and a mortgage. Banking days do not include, obviously, Saturdays and Sundays or holidays where a bank is not open. So if I got an offer accepted Wednesday, the first banking day would be Thursday. So it'd be Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So I would have till the next Wednesday, which ends up being 7 days, but that's because there was a weekend. If I got it on a Sunday night accepted, then Friday would be my deadline. So there's actually 5 days. I hope that helps. The next one, this is an actual offer I did for somebody. This offer is conditional upon the inspection of the subject property by a home inspector at the buyer's own expense and obtaining a report satisfactory to the buyer in the buyer's sole and absolute discretion, which is saying that we don't have to qualify or quantify if there's an issue and you're too nervous to go forward. So if the home inspector says there's a lot of moisture in the basement, there's mold in the sheeting in the attic, or the septic system needs to be replaced. Now there is a septic inspection done by an actual septic inspector. A home inspector won't do that. So if you want a full test on the septic system, you need a separate guy for that. And this is in your absolute discretion. And if you don't like it, you can walk away. And again, you get your deposit back. The seller agrees. So not later than 5 banking days, excluding Saturday, Sunday, and statutory holidays. Same thing. And this offer shall be null and void, and the deposit shall be returned to the buyer in full without deduction. The seller agrees to cooperate in providing access to the property for the purpose of this inspection. This condition is included for the benefit of the buyer, may be waived at the buyer's sole option by notice in writing to the seller as aforesaid within the time period stated herein. Now, sometimes people will put a date on that condition. Like they'll say, okay, by May 5th or by like certain dates. You can do it by the date or the 5 business days. Sometimes it's 7 business days, sometimes 10 business days. You can change that too. Those are conditions that allow you to kill the deal if those conditions are not fulfilled. So this one was in Severn, and my client wanted to make sure he could build a garage on the property. So we also put a conditional upon the buyer doing his due diligence with the Township of Severn and lawyer regarding the property limitations not later than 5 banking days. That this condition is fulfilled, this offer shall be null and void, deposit returned. So this was another condition to make sure he could do what he wanted. If he couldn't do what he wanted, then he didn't want the property. The seller represents and warrants. So when the seller represents and warrants, this isn't a condition. This isn't a condition of the sale or the purchase. They're warranting to the best of their knowledge and belief that during the seller's occupancy of the property, the sewage system has been in good working order, and further represents and warrants that the sewage system will be in good working order on completion of this transaction. The parties agree that this warranty shall survive and not merge on the completion of this transaction, but apply only to the state of the property existing at completion of this transaction. Again, another mouthful of words. What it means is they never had a problem with the septic tank. They're representing and warranting that for the time they live there, there's never been a problem with the septic. Everything's always worked well, and it will be in that state on closing. So if they had a problem before closing, they'd have to fix it. But after closing, there's no guarantee. So nobody guarantees anything after closing. Like you're not going to guarantee a used fridge after closing, right? You're not going to guarantee that something happens to septic a week later and now they're going to come back and sue you to fix it. So these representations and warranties normally die after closing. It's just that everything has to be in good working order and working at the time. So chattels and fixtures should be in every single agreement, whether you have a country property or not. So the seller represents and warrants that the chattels and fixtures as included in this agreement of purchase and sale will be in good working order, free from all liens and encumbrances on completion. Again, the parties agree that the representation and warranty shall survive and not merge on completion, but apply only to the state of the property at completion. Same thing. So when we do our final walkthrough, which I always say to do the day before closing, we go through and we turn the stove on, we check the fridge, I even turn the dishwasher on, because once you move in, you can't go back, right? You can't go back on those things. So you have to check them the day before, make sure everything's in good working order. Because after the day of closing, don't have to work. But everything has to be in good working order on closing. So that's in the agreement. The other thing is the seller agrees to provide a 0-0 water test prior to closing and agrees to allow the buying agent access to the property to obtain a sample. So what this is if you have a well, a lot of banks want a 0-0 water test. If there's a UV system in the house, you're basically guaranteed a 0-0 water test. So if you see there's a UV system in there, which this house had one, I just wanted a 0-0 water test. If you put it in this way that I do, the seller will have to do whatever they have to do to get the 0-0 water test. So if I do a test and it's no good, they have to put a UV system in it. I go back and do another test until I obtain a sample that says 0-0. Now, potable water, a lot of people think, well, I only need potable water because potable allows a little bit of variance in the numbers, but some banks will only take 0-0. So I just say 0-0 across the board. And that access, I have to take the water sample. because I don't know if they're giving me a sample from a bottle of water. I don't know if they're going to the actual tap. You got to take the aerator off. You have to clean it with rubbing alcohol. Like there's a bunch of stuff you have to do. If you just take it straight from a tap, it's always going to come back bad because the little aerator thing on the end of your tap has bacteria in it. So it will always come back bad. Believe me, I've done millions of these, not millions, but hundreds. And if you don't take it all apart and do it right, it's going to come back bad. I have to go in and take the sample. I send it away. I pay for it. And that 0 we give to the lawyer. They can give it to the bank, or you can give it to your mortgage guy. They also had a septic tank. The seller agrees to have the septic tank pumped and visually inspected at least 1 week prior to closing, and to provide the buyer a copy of the receipt. I always say 1 week before closing, because you don't want the septic tank pumped 2-3 months if possible. Like the closer to closing is better, because then you're getting a tank that's been cleaned of who knows what they've put down there. A septic company will visually inspect a tank, and if it had an issue anyway, they would have to report it. You can't allow something wrong to be with the septic system. So when they come and pump it, they visually inspect it, and they'll write on the bill, inspected, blah, 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 and they explain it. The seller and buyer agree to 2 walkthroughs at mutually agreed upon times. So these things are all things that have to be done. It's not conditional. So if I firm the deal, all these things happen. That's it. If you get your finance and the home inspection's good, all these things have to happen regardless. If it didn't happen, there's technically you can walk away from the deal. But these things all have to happen. They're not asking, it's not a condition, it's got to happen. So the seller and buyer agreed to 2 walkthroughs prior to closing at mutually agreed upon times. So we always go one halfway and then one right at the end before closing. Now, a lot of agents have all kinds of clauses that they put in there, like no one's ever died in the house, that it's never been used for illegal substance growth. It's never, like the Toronto agents, sometimes they'll have 2 or 3 pages of all this crazy stuff. Like, now, if the house is rough, I'll put a clause that says it has to be left in a clean and broom swept condition. This house that we saw was like stellar. You could eat off the floors. And I find sometimes, you don't need to insult somebody and say those kind of things if they look so organized and clean. Now, a lot of agents put it automatically. They automatically put house has to be left in a clean, broom swept condition. Another thing is that if there's garbage laying outside and all around the property, I will actually put in the offer that they agree to remove all debris and stuff from the lawn and stuff. I'll put it right in there. The other thing is, if you can see certain problems in your home inspection, or you see problems before the home inspection, like, oh, I don't know, let me think of something that I've seen. The roof is bad. So I might, I could put right in that offer in Schedule A, I could put the seller agrees to have the shingles on the roof repaired or replaced prior to closing. So if there's stuff I see right away and it's, my client's like, well, I don't want it if they don't do that, then I put it right in there and they have to agree to do that right off the top. Another condition that a lot of people will put in, and I didn't in that one because I already knew it was okay, but that the furnace and the air conditioner are owned outright. And if you saw in the in here where a chattel and fixture was be all in good working order, would include like a furnace and everything because it's attached, right? And it says free from any liens and encumbrances on here. I'm gonna find it for you. I think it's right here. Free from any liens and encumbrances on completion. What that means is that the furnace can't be a rental. Okay? So a lot of people will add the seller represents and warrants that the furnace and air conditioning system is owned outright and there's no rental contract. Now, the reason is I had a client and they said it was a new furnace, it was in the deal. And then we ended up having a bill. She got a bill for a rental contract of $100 a month and she refused to pay it. So I called the seller and the selling agent, and he goes, no, the furnace isn't a rental. And I said, well, it is, because she's getting charged. And I said, we didn't buy or agree to assume a rental on a furnace. So like, we're not paying it. So it ended up that the seller, 2 months after closing, had to pay $8,000 and the agent $2,000 because it was a brand new furnace and it was a $10,000 buyout. We never assumed it. So earlier in this agreement of purchase and sale, there is a spot where, and I was explaining to you, like this is all standard writing, right? So this is the chattels that were included. The hot water heater was included, so it wasn't a rental. The water softener, the filtration system, everything was already in there and she owned it all. So that was included in a chattel, which means it has to be in good working order and be free of liens and encumbrances, right? They can't owe money on them. So the rental items, in this case, because it was a country property, was a propane tank. So if the rental item, if I was going to assume a furnace rental, I would have to put it here. If I was going to assume an AC rental, I would have to put it under the rental items. So you are covered even if you don't put it in Schedule A. But, you know, to just be double sure, if it's in Schedule A, it has to be, the agent has to go over it a lot clearer because it's a separate line item. So there's certain little clauses that you can put in there based on the property. So if we were going to buy an in-town property, the stuff for the water test wouldn't be there. The stuff for the septic wouldn't be there. But chattels and fixtures, broom swept condition, I normally do put that. That one I didn't, like I said, because it was so stellar, like it was so clean. And it was only one floor, no basement. There was no garage. Like it was like a cottage, so there wasn't a lot of stuff there. Those kind of things, you change those conditions based on the property. And a lot of times I wouldn't put it as a condition, I would put it as a statement. The seller agrees to do this, and it has to be done. If it wasn't done, you could either not close a deal, or you can ask for money off the day before closing, or hold back by the lawyer. He can hold back some money until that is done. So the main conditions are finance, inspection, the sale of a house. Those are true conditions, or lawyer due diligence. A lot of agents automatically put the lawyer due diligence clause, meaning that you can send it to a lawyer and go over. And that one was in that one. It was that the township and the lawyer both say he can do what he wants. So hopefully this helps you with conditions and puts it into English language for you, so you kind of understand exactly what it's doing. And you want to make sure that you don't have 4 pages of conditions and stuff, especially in multiple offers. Like the more convoluted that you make it, the more people don't want to work with you. So like putting in, if there was ever marijuana grown in the house, like now it's legal, it doesn't even matter, right? Like there's certain things that don't really need to be put in there, especially like if I've asked, oh, has there been a death in the house? And she said, no, I don't need to put it in there. But a lot of agents, especially Toronto ones, have 2 or 3 pages of conditions that they just copy and paste on every single one. And I find that the more convoluted and confusing it looks, people don't want to work with you. They're like, oh my God, right? You're scaring them. So you need your main ones that protect you. That's the most important part. The frivolous ones, it's a waste of everybody's time, you know? I learned that early on because I used to put a whole bunch and it scared off my buyer and my and the sellers. And I realized that most of these things, like, honestly, they're irrelevant. So yeah, you have to be straight to the point, clean, crisp, clean. Everybody's on the same page. There's no messing around. There's no double talk. And it makes a much easier deal for everybody. If you like my stuff, hit the like, hit the subscribe, or drop me a comment if there's something you'd like me to do a video on.